Okay, so
No, sir.
welcome
You
everybody.
just said
Tonight,
it.
yeah, tonight is Lag BaOmer, and the main figure associated with Lag BaOmer is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who, according to tradition, died on this day, so it's his yahrzeit. But the Gemara relates some very interesting stories about him. He was an extremist, but then later converted to being a moderate. So how do you do that? How do you convert an extremist to a moderate? That's and there will be a divine intervention here. So I think it's easy for the divine. For us, that's a little bit harder to deal with people who are extremists. But maybe we can learn some things from it. So let's start by looking at the PowerPoint and who was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he was a second century Mishnaic sage. Oh, let me start the slideshow. And you see a picture of books. Why are there books there? Oh, welcome, Aaron. Um, you see his picture, right? But you also see a pile of books. What's he famous for? For learning Torah for many, many years and emphasizing Torah, as we're going to see, at the expense of going to work. But let's not jump the gun. Let's start with a story. And the story starts, a Talmudic story, it starts like a joke. You'll see in a second. What else do we know about him? So I said he uh, comes out to be an extremist, but then something changes his opinions, and it seems like he becomes moderate. So let's jump right into the story that's related in Shabbat, Masechet Shabbat, Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Bet. And the story starts like this. Three rabbis are sitting in a bar discussing the Romans' cultural and engineering achievements. Do you see the slide that says that?
No,
Oh, let
I
me,
do.
let me try
I don't.
again.
Now I
No?
see it. Now,
No.
now
Okay.
I see it.
Okay. So we have three rabbis, and I'll just give you a moniker for each one. You tell me, what do you think they're going to say about the Romans' cultural and engineering achievements in the land of Israel at that time, right? So we have Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to call him the open-minded rabbi. Rabbi Yossi, the silent rabbi. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the fanatical. What would Rabbi Yehuda say?
That the Romans have, or that the Romans have have done a good job with their aqueducts and the
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, they've raised our standard of living.
Yes, raise our standards. Their engineering marvels are amazing. They're cultural. They brought culture to the land. Okay. Rabbi Yossi, okay, there's nothing to say about him. He remains silent. What will Rabbi Shimon say?
I don't care what they do. They don't belong here.
exactly, and they're tyrannical.
Okay, but
They're
even
doing
more
it.
than
They did
that.
it for their own interest. They have their they made
Very
markets
good.
and they
So,
put
Mm.
harlots there. They
right,
build
right.
bridges.
So you can't trust him. Right, very good, mother. So there, he's going to say, let's see it. Let's actually see it inside. So I'll just start a little bit with the Hebrew version, then we'll switch to the English. So, Patach Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi. Rabbi Judah, remember the open-minded rabbi? He said, Kama na'im ma'asehen shel umazo. How pleasant and beautiful are the actions of this nation. Tiknu shvakim, from the word shuk, they established markets. Tiknu gesharim, what's gesher? Gesher, right? Gesher, like the famous song, Gesher, Sal, Me'od. Right? Bridges. They built bridges. So right, so all this technology is great. And tiknum al chatzaot. They established the bathhouses. Okay. Then Rabbi Yossi Shatak. He was silent. He didn't say anything, which sometimes is a smart thing to do, as we'll see later in the story. נענה רבי שמעון בן יוחאי ואמר, כל מה שתיקנו, לא תיקנו אלא לצורך עצמן. Everything that they established, it was only for their own purpose. And then he goes back to the same examples that Rabbi Yehuda was talking about. Tiknu shvakim, the markets that they established, that's lehoshiv bahen zonot. That's to place prostitutes in them and cause us to sin. Merchatzaot, you talk about bathhouses? Laden bahen atzman, just for their own pleasure, not for us. And gsharim, do you think they build bridges just because it's an engineering accomplishment? No, litol bahen meches, to tax us. So every time we pass on the bridge, we have to pay them. All right, so we have three very differing opinions, or two differing opinions and a silent guy. And then we're going to continue the story in English. So what happened? Okay, so we saw this. You can read it quietly. This is the same thing that we just said in the Hebrew. We have Rabbi Yehuda, we have Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is berating them. He's bashing the Romans, basically. And there's nothing good that can come out of them. But there was also a guy, Yehuda, son of converts, who was sitting there. So it's really actually four people were there. This guy doesn't have an opinion. He just listens. But it turns out that he is what's a guy who constantly speaks, who can't shut up? What's the term for that?
Blabbermouth.
Blabber, thank you. So it turns out he's a blabbermouth. So look what happened. Yehuda said, oh, you have a volunteer to read it?
Yeah, I'll volunteer, but why is it necessary to identify him as a son of converts?
Oh, that's the Talmud talks about him like that.
I thought that was not a nice thing to do.
Yeah, that's his like moniker. But um, yeah, I don't know why they. It's a good question because you're not supposed to
Okay.
mention that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household. And those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled, Rabbi Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. Rabbi Yossi, who remained silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee.
And before I show you what will be the fate of Rabbi Shimon, I'm going to ask you, what do you think will be his fate? Rabbi Shimon Bar
Execute him.
Yochai.
Execute him.
Exactly. Okay,
Okay.
now you read.
And Rabbi Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed.
Okay, so they have to go into
Sounds
hiding.
like sounds like some of our kings. What can
Yeah,
I say?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Elazar went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts. They went and they hid in a
Yeah.
cave.
So I want to record my opposition to this biased statement. Some of the most heroic women in the Holocaust never revealed. Hannah Senesh, right? You know the story. Never
That's
revealed,
right.
even when they were tortured by the Nazis, never revealed where the partisans were, and so, yeah. So I just want to say that it's just a reflection of the general attitude towards women. So now they go and they hide in a cave. And then what happens? Okay, one more.
Okay, a miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray, and they would again remove their clothes afterward so that they would not become tattered. They sat in the cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?
Okay, so they're about to leave the cave. What does it do to you when you're spending 12 years in a cave just studying Torah and praying? What do you think it does to you?
Up to sand in your neck. You forgot that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's in order to keep their clothes. They couldn't wash them, and there's no laundry. So,
Hmm.
okay. But what does it do to you mentally in terms of how you view the world? And um, it could easily make you extreme, right? You think that this is how you should live. When you get used to that, right? Of course, it's an exaggeration, the whole story, but it's a legend. But they purposely use 12 years. That's the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's what people should do: study Torah and pray all day. So now they go out into the world, and now we're going to switch to the video because now we'll see it. It's nice the way they created the video in Aleph Beta. What happens when they went out into the world and saw that the world is not comprised of people studying Torah all day and praying? How are they going to react to that? So that's where it becomes very interesting. So we're going to switch to Aleph Beta.
They're in the cave for 12 years, miraculously sustained by a spring of water and a carob tree. Until one day, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet himself, informs them they are no longer being pursued. Now, let's see what happens when they leave the cave and re-enter the world. Nafku. They emerged. Chazu inchi de kakarve vizare, and they saw people plowing and sowing seeds. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai doesn't like what he sees. Amar, manichin chaye olam v'oskim b'chaye sha'ah. He cried out, "These people are abandoning eternal life for life of this world. They're putting aside Torah study to work their fields, worthless earthly pursuits." He couldn't imagine why anyone would do that. Kol makom shenotnim einehem miyad nisraf. And suddenly, any place Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son would turn their gaze, it immediately went up in flames.
So stop, pause for a second. He didn't see people, doing partying and drinking beer and who knows what. He just saw people working, even that. So look what it did to him staying in that cave and studying Torah. He forgot how the real world operates. And there's something to learn from that. When you sit in a very secluded community, or you're part of a very secluded community, you start to think that the whole world should be like that.
I think his real problem, Shammai, was eating from the carob tree. If you,
Yeah.
if you've ever eaten any of those, you know that.
Yeah.
I wonder if he still had teeth when he came out.
That can explain. Okay, so he's become fanatical. He's like, I see people working. Okay, they need to go up in flames. So let's see what happens.
Yas tabat kol. A voice from heaven called out to them, V'amar lahem, and it said, L'hachariv olami etzatem? Did you come out here to destroy my world? Chizru l'ma'aratchem. Go back into your cave, before you cause any more damage. After this heavenly rebuke, Rabbi Shimon and his son returned to the cave for one more year, and then emerge once again. But this time, things go a little differently. Nafku. They came out. Kol hecha dehavimachi Rabbi Lazar, havimasi Rabbi Shimon. Whatever Rabbi Lazar damaged, Rabbi Shimon repaired. In other words, Rabbi Elazar is still burning things left and right. But for Rabbi Shimon, something has changed. Not only is he not spitting fire from his eyes anymore, all the damage that his son causes, he's able to undo.
Why can't he influence his son? I think this speaks to a deeper truth. Look at the fanatics today. Look at the settlers in the West Bank. They cannot control their own youth, right? Even if I assume that the older ones are moderate and they know that burning up villages and doing pogroms is wrong, but they just have no influence on the young. This is what's happening in the story, right? The father-son, you would think they bonded. You would think the son would learn from his father, but what is the Gemara telling us? That the son, the younger one, he's still burning up the people, the people, the villagers who are working their fields, even though the father understands they're perfectly fine. They're doing what God wants them to do, to work and earn a living. Yet he cannot have any influence on his son. And exactly what happens today, I think.
It's very true when you look at or read about these statistics about these mass shooters. They're inevitably men between like 18 and 35 years old. They're the people who do it because Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Same thing with the suicide bombers. Remember during the Intifada,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Same thing, right? The older people, they said it's wrong. They said it's against Islam, but they just didn't have any influence, just like in this story. So it's really amazing. It's a phenomenon across the board. Okay.
Rabbi Shimon then turns to his son and says, Dai le'olam ani ve'ata. My son, you and I, we're enough for the world. Now let's stop here and just name a few things that should be bothering us. First, what's with this whole laser eyes thing? You study Torah for a bunch of years and then, boom, you become a Marvel superhero? I mean, I'm no Rabbi Shimon, but I spent some time in yeshiva and all I got was a bad back. Also, why did they go on this rampage of destruction, and what changed for Rabbi Shimon the second time around? One day he's a human flamethrower, and a year later he's a peacemaker. What happened? And whatever it was, it seems to have something to do with that cryptic statement, you and I are enough for the world. Enough for what? How are we supposed to understand that? We're not ready to answer these questions just yet. Let's finish the story and bear our questions in mind as we see how it all gets resolved. Bahade Panya Damale Shabta. One Friday afternoon, as the sun was setting and Shabbat was arriving, Chazu Hahu Saba. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son saw an old man. Tahave Nakit Tre Medane Asav Rahit Ben Hashmashot. He was holding two big bundles of hadassim, fragrant myrtle branches, and running at twilight. Amru Le, they said to him, Hani Lamalach, why do you have these branches in your hands? Amar Lahu L'chvod Shabbat. He responded, they're in honor of Shabbat. Apparently hadassim were the 2nd century version of a fragrant bouquet of flowers. V'tiskilach b'chad. They asked him, wouldn't one bundle be enough? Chad keneged zachor, v'chad keneged shamor. The old man explained, one bundle corresponds to zachor, the commandment to remember Shabbat, and the other to shamor, the commandment to guard Shabbat. In other words, he seems to be saying that since the Bible uses two different words when it commands us to observe Shabbat, it deserves a double honor. Amr le lebre, chazik hama chavivin mitzvot al Yisrael. After hearing this, Rabbi Shimon turned to his son and said, look how beloved the commandments are to the children of Israel. Finally, yativ da'ataihu. Their minds were put to ease, and they lived happily ever after. So, do we feel like the story makes sense now? Do we know what it's really about? And what have we learned about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Well, I'd like to suggest that this story is actually a progression. It shows an evolution in the way Rabbi Shimon looked at the world, from laser eyes to healing eyes to a mind at ease. Something pivotal changes at each step of the story. What are those changes? And what might they teach us about the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Let's take a look at the story one more time. When Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were hiding from the Romans back in that cave, what was their life like? Every waking moment, 24/7, was spent praying or studying Torah. It's like the 10,000-hour rule for spirituality. When they emerge, they've ascended to incredible heights in their connection to God. In fact, it sounds like they've reached the highest level anyone could aspire to. They can see past the falsehood and the vanities of the world, material things like working the earth, and understand what's really important in life. Holy pursuits, like learning Torah, plumbing the depths of God's wisdom. They're so completely aligned with God's will that doing anything else doesn't make sense to them. And yet, if you only see the world in black and white, what happens to everything that doesn't fit in? Well, there's just no place for it. And maybe that explains the laser vision. Because if I really believe that the way we're meant to live life really is a matter of black and white, then when I see someone living the wrong way, then to me that's a worthless life. In my eyes, I'm basically reducing it to a pile of ash. So maybe, when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked at the world around him and couldn't find any merit in what he saw, then either metaphorically or literally, that judgment burned everything to the ground. And you know how God feels about that kind of zealotry? Not so good. He actually responds by sending Rabbi Shimon right back into his cave. Because if we take that black and white, either or perspective, that only leaves space for people who see the world the way we see it. There's just no room for anyone or anything else. That's where Rabbi Shimon finds himself at the end of part 1 of the story. But what's he supposed to do now? How can he be true to what he believes and still manage to live in the world? And we know he did manage it somehow. When he comes out the second time, He puts a stop to the destruction. But how? What changed? Well, remember what he told his son. Dai la'olam ani ve'ata. You and I are enough for the world. Maybe what that means is Rabbi Shimon has found a new way to look at other people. The rest of the world, sure, they're crazy, and they're wrong, and it's an unimaginable tragedy that they're wasting their lives the way they are. But it doesn't mean we need to confront the tragedy and stomp it out. Dai la'olam ani ve'ata. The two of us can just live our lives the right way, and let that be enough.
I don't think that's what he's telling his son. I think he's telling him it's not a tragedy. I think he's interpreting the story a little bit too in an extreme manner, or I think he really went through a revolution in his thinking about people working in the world, and how he understands that it's not a tragedy. This is how the world is supposed to. God wants us to work and earn a living, but do it in the proper way, doing it, follow God's laws. And I think that's what
but
he's.
the statement itself is he's telling his son that it's not necessary to bring everybody into your way of life.
Exactly.
So, we're not seeking to convert everybody, let them live and be well. We can be enough within ourselves for our role.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what he means. And what they're doing is legitimate. And what they're doing, for us, we want to learn Torah and pray. That's for you and me. But right, for the others, then they serve God in their way by working, by being honest workers, by being family people, etc.
Yeah.
So here's Rabbi Shimon's
Big lesson.
approach. I can bear other people's existence as long as I just accept that they're woefully misguided and learn to expect nothing from them. I'm very tolerant. Now, I didn't actually do a survey, but I'll bet that if you go and ask your friends what they think about this kind of tolerance, it might make them a little uncomfortable. Sure, it's better than laser eyes, but Rabbi Shimon and his son aren't winning the Nobel Peace Prize anytime soon either. But we're not done yet. They have one more encounter. They meet an old man carrying myrtle branches just before Shabbat. And this time, they do something different. They don't just observe and judge. They ask him questions. They find their curiosity. They allow themselves to listen to someone else's perspective, something they wouldn't have been able to do a year earlier. And when they finally did, they found they could actually admire and appreciate someone who serves God differently. Chazi kama chaviv mitzvot al Yisrael. Other Jews also love God's commandments. Maybe they don't connect to God by spending all their time learning Torah. Maybe they connect to him when they're in a field by cutting branches in his honor. But even if they go about their lives differently, they're still coming from the same good place we are. And now we understand the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was a man with incredible Torah knowledge, extreme devotion, and intense clarity. And he was a man who evolved to appreciate the beauty of other people's efforts to do the right thing. Think about how this applies to us. We all have those one or two views that we're just so sure about. The idea of anyone thinking differently just seems crazy. Maybe it's about religion, or maybe it's a political issue, or something more local to your community or family. Whatever it is, when someone has the opposite view, you just can't believe it. How can they not know they're wrong? And you just know you have to stop them. But even when we just know we're 100% right, when we know that we have more clarity or experience or intelligence or moral sensitivity, and the world would just be so much better when people finally listen to us, maybe standing on a soapbox is the wrong call. Instead, as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai learned, maybe we need to stop and listen to other people and try to understand. Ask them difficult questions, raise our objections, see what kind of response we get. Now, that doesn't mean we need to agree with everything or even anything that we hear. But if the people we disagree with are coming from a good place, shouldn't we appreciate that and respect that? Lag BaOmer is the anniversary of the death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But according to tradition, it's also the day that marked the end of a terrible tragedy. Not too long before the story we told, another sage, Rabbi Akiva, lost 24,000 students in a plague. According to the Talmud, this plague was sent for one reason. These students failed to show each other respect. Despite their involvement in Torah study, this terrible flaw caused them all to perish. But this plague ended on Lag BaOmer. And what better way to emerge from this period than to celebrate the legacy of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the man who learned how to respect others, even when they viewed the world in a radically different way.
Okay, so thank you to the Aleph Beta video. How do we apply that to people in our life? When we meet people who think they're 100% right and they don't want to hear other people.
I mean, that is exactly what the whole world is like today.
Yeah,
It takes your breath away. You become either afraid to respond or you absent yourself from, a constructive dialogue. It's horrible what has happened.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's important to show people, expose them to different opinions. So I have this diagram here of black and white. Now think about it. You can only see the word black, right, when it's colored white. If the word
Mhm.
black here were in black, you wouldn't see anything. And the same goes for the word white. If it were white, if the color of the letters were white, right, it would just blend in the white and you wouldn't see anything. So you need to have contrast. You need to be exposed. This is what this diagram is trying to show. You need to be exposed to contrasting opinions, to opposing opinions. It has to be part of the education system. And what's happening in this country is just terrible. That's
Yeah.
yeah, not allowing to teach about certain subjects, and not allowing to, books are being banned, and it's
But you know what? It's on both sides. The extremes of both sides do the exact same thing. The methods are the same at the ends of the spectrum.
so here's the picture of the site in Israel, just to show you of his grave. And I don't think that's what they teach there today. I wish they would take classes from all segments of society, Haredi and non-Haredi and secular and Jews and Muslims, and take them and teach what the Aleph Beta video taught. But unfortunately, that's not
Yeah.
what's happening there. No, they come there and they just reinforce. It's like a bubble. They just reinforce what they've been taught all those years, and that they're right and everybody else is wrong. So
You know what? We all do that. I mean, it's not just at the yeshivot. I mean, the Orthodox do it to the conservatives do it to the Reform. I mean, it's my way or the highway. That's
yeah.
that's what the
No,
world
but
has
look,
become.
there's this Chabad rabbi who now comes to teach at Har Zion every other week, Rabbi Shai.
Somebody told me that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think like the left wing is actually open to the more, so-called more religious, more Haredi. We're willing to hear them. We're willing to, listen to their classes. It's the opposite. They're not willing to. Yeah.
I'd argue with you about that. I've seen, I guess I would call myself a passionate centrist. That's who I am. But I have seen both both groups, the left wing condemns without even thinking the so-called more frum people. They mock the need to be kosher, and then the more frum people say that the left wing aren't even Jews. So everybody does it.
All right. So thank you for joining us tonight.
That was great.
Okay.